Would you like to know the crazy name Vince McMahon gave to his yacht? Do you want to discover what Brock Lesnar shouted at a teenager that followed him to the toilet at a gym? Could you guess what was the only thing the Undertaker said to Shawn Michaels the day after the Montreal Screwjob? You will be very surprised when you learn what John Cena used to do to eat for free when he lived in the back of his car. You will have all the answers to these questions in this video. You are on the Wrestling Paradise. 7 unforgettable WWE stories. Here we go! Let's start with a story that concerns the Beast Incarnate, the conqueror of the Undertaker's shriek at WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar. One day, he was going to have a workout in a gym where several of his colleagues, Wade Barrett and Bray Wyatt among others, were training too, and in which there were also ordinary people that were training as usual. But when they saw Brock arrive in the gym, everybody stopped what they were doing and was in shock for a little while in front of this phenom. That makes you think how impressive it must be to see him in real life. But there was a teenager in that gym that was even more fascinated by Brock than anyone. To a point where the kids started following Brock everywhere, on every machine where he was working, coming to sit right next to him every time. And what's absolutely crazy is that when Brock went to the bathroom, this teenager followed him and even had the bad idea of going into the toilet where Brock was. And when that happened, the Conqueror yelled a phrase that his WWE colleagues were able to hear. "Are you trying to see my penis?" The kid immediately went away in terror, and he didn't bother Brock at all anymore. It's safe to say that it is wise to leave Lesnar alone when he is working out. Long before becoming the WWE poster boy and being the star of the company between 2005 and 2014, John Cena had some hard times. Indeed, after graduating in sports physiology, he moved to Los Angeles trying to find a job that was related to his studies, but it was a big failure. He had such a rough patch that he even had to live in the back of his car. And what's even crazier is that at the time he worked as a bouncer at a restaurant, he had a habit that was creative, to say the least. Every night after work, he went to a pizzeria that challenged its customers to eat one of their large pizzas in full so that they could have it for free. And so that's what John was doing. Can you only imagine the leader of the C Nation, who is now a successful actor in Hollywood, finding solutions to eat for free? Whatever we may think of him, what is certain is that he has come a long way. In 2016, Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose had a rivalry during which Y2J took a bump on thumbtacks for the first time in his career. He says that at that moment, he had the feeling of having 1,000 knives stabbing him all over his body. But what is completely surreal in this storyline between these two men we will meet later in All Elite Wrestling is the role, if we can put it like that the potted plant had in this story. While they were preparing to do a highlight reel, Chris Jericho's talk show, they thought that the set was too empty, but also that it would be nice to find an object that could also be used as a weapon. At that moment, they had an idea. They needed a potted plant. And what's hilarious to imagine is that a few hours before a show, Jericho and Ambrose went to explore the arena where they were. They tried to open all the doors of the offices, and they managed to find one that was open. And there, they found the perfect plant. So they stole it, and this plant was even seriously involved in their rivalry, since after Jericho hit Ambrose with it, WWE even renamed the plant Mitch, and wrote a message to honor its memory. It's completely absurd, isn't it? But don't move, there are even more incredible stories to come, folks, so make sure to stay until the end of this video. One of WWE's most significant characters is Vince McMahon. Admired by some, hated by others, the least we can say is that he leaves no one indifferent, and that he is not an ordinary human being. Just think back to what happened at the end of the Royal Rumble in 2005. While Batista and John Cena, the last two men in the match, managed to both fall outside of the ring at the same time, Vince McMahon came with more determination than ever to fix this problem. But when he got into the ring, he tore his quads. Can you only imagine his pain? And yet he continued as if nothing had happened, sitting on the floor. And that day, he even refused to be helped by anyone, and he managed to walk by himself to his limousine and go to the hospital. A story that represents Vince McMahon quite well. And for the record, he also has a yacht, and the name he gave to it is astonishing. We could think that if he was going to give a name to his yacht, he would choose a classy one, or maybe one to celebrate himself, but not at all. He named his yacht Sexy. Without the shadow of a doubt, there is only one Vince McMahon. In 2018, John Cena had a difficult year, breaking up with Nikki Bella, whom he was supposed to marry, and also from a wrestling standpoint, with a big loss against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And it was also a time in which he moved further and further away from the WWE to devote himself to his acting career, which would later become a success since he would star in the Fast and Furious saga and the Peacemaker show, just to name a few. But what caused him to have a depression at that time is not what we would have imagined. In fact, he was one of the main actors of the movie Hidden Strike, alongside Jackie Chan. And while he still had his imposing and massive WWE physique, the crew of the movie made him do yoga to make him more flexible and for him to be able to do kicks at the height of his head. It was something very hard for Cena, and in this process of doing yoga, he lost 20 pounds. And what made him have a depression was to tell himself that all the effort he put in for 30 years in building his body, this physique he achieved after all these years, were gradually disappearing. Fortunately, in the end, yoga did him good and brought him an inner balance in his life. But on the other hand, what is undeniable is that since then, in his appearances in the WWE, he has never regained the impressive physique that was his trademark during his best years. When Chris Jericho returned to WWE once again in 2016, he wasn't supposed to stay very long. Originally, he was just supposed to go all the way to WrestleMania 32, have his rivalry with AJ Styles, and then leave and go on tour with his rock band Fozzy. But nothing happened as planned. For the record, he was first scheduled to face Dean Ambrose at WrestleMania 32, before Ambrose ended up facing Brock Lesnar. In the end, when he faced AJ Styles, which allowed him to turn heel, Jericho had a good time, and seeing that his friends from Fozzy were working on other projects, he decided to stay. And then, in the summer of 2016, he became friends with Kevin Owens, a friendship that would give us hilarious segments where Chris put on his list all the people that annoyed him. Owens was Universal Champion for a while. There was also the amazing Festival of Friendship and a match between the two men at WrestleMania 33. Originally, their face-off at the grandest stage of them all was even meant to be for the Universal title, which Jericho was planned to win and then lose at the next pay-per-view against Brock Lesnar. In the end, their match was only for the United States title, and Brock would win the Universal title at WrestleMania against Goldberg. The fact of the matter is that Chris Jericho ended up staying in WWE for a total of 16 months during this run, constantly pushing back the date he thought he was going to tour with Fozzy, when originally he planned to stay there for only 4 months. And the reason is very simple. During this period of his career, maybe more than ever, he had a lot of fun. After the Montreal Screwjob in November 1997, Shawn Michaels was one of the most hated men in the wrestling industry. At Survivor Series, he had been the main actor in the controversial finish during which WWE took the title from Bret Hart to prevent him from taking it with him to WCW, where he was about to go. Shawn says that it was a time where when he came home to San Antonio and looked in the mirror, he was upset, thinking about all this hate towards him, and that this is not what he had dreamed about at all as a child. But what's even crazier in this story is that the day after the Montreal Screwjob, which had people talk a lot, HBK only wanted to speak to one person, the Undertaker. He considered that they were both the pillars around which everything was built, and that the opinion of the dead man, who was already the locker room leader at that time, was the only one that really mattered to him. The Heartbreak Kid went in front of Vince McMahon's office, saw Taker coming out, and then they looked at each other and the Phenom told him, "We're cool." And they never talked about this story together again. It's safe to say that The Undertaker is a man of few words. That was crazy, right? Can you believe how Vince McMahon named his yacht? Who would have thought that Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose stole a potted plant in an arena one day? And also, what Brock Lesnar shouted at that kid that bothered him. All these stories clearly showed us that the world of sports entertainment isn't like any other. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?